watched Pokemon as a kid, I often caught the episodes airing out of order, so I would sometimes find myself confused at certain bits of continuity. When did Charmander evolve? Where did Togepi come from? When did Team Rocket get Wobbuffet? This was par for the course when it comes to watching a show with a continuous narrative on a haphazard schedule. Sometimes you would get lucky and catch the episode where Charmeleon evolved into Charizard, or when they found the Togepi egg. Actually, that was the same episode. But there was one member of Ash's Pokemon team that I was never able to actually see the origin of. I am talking about Ash's Tauros. Yes, even though Ash didn't use Tauros very often, whenever he did, I would ask, where did it come from? Yet for some reason, the episode where Ash actually caught Tauros never seemed to show up on TV. As of today, I finally have the answer. And not only is it surprising, but it is also an interesting look into the perils of serialized storytelling. Chapter 1. Who is Ash's Tauros? Most of the Pokemon who belong to Ash are some of the most recognizable Pokemon around. Pikachu, the starters, Pidgeotto. These are Pokemon that even someone who only kinda knows Pokemon would be aware of. For a series with a tagline of gotta catch 'em all, Ash captures very few Pokemon. So when he does own a Pokemon, it's usually a pretty big deal. But not all of Ash's Pokemon are treated equally. When Ash has a Pokemon that isn't one of the faces of the franchise, he usually just sends it off to Professor Oak, only to be used once in a blue moon. This is the case with Pokemon like Krabby, Muck, and of course, Tauros. The first time I, and probably most other non-Japanese viewers, saw Ash's Tauros was in the episode Showdown at the Poke Corral, where it is just casually mentioned that Ash has 30 Tauros. While this seems like a strange revelation, the episode just kinda mentions it like it's no big deal and that it's something the audience should already be aware of. The fact that Ash has 30 Tauros is important to the story of this episode, since so much of this episode revolves around Ash being compared to his rival Gary. And the episode shows us how many different sorts of species Gary has obtained by this point. Ash having such a large percentage of his Pokemon ownership being taken up by 30 of this singular kind of Pokemon is a humorous way of showing how much he has been trailing behind in filling his Pokedex. This aspect of the story would mean a lot more if we actually knew why Ash had 30 Tauros, but for most viewers it seems they just manifested out of thin air. Ash's Tauros is most prominently featured in the episodes Hello Pumelo and Enter the Dragonite, which detail Ash's battle with Drake. No, not that Drake. The anime Drake, the final opponent of the Orange League. Before the battle, Ash finds that his Snorlax is being a little eepy bean. Problem is, Ash doesn't really have a lot of Pokemon waiting in the stands to fight, except for his trusty Tauros. Tauros? Since when does Ash have a Tauros? Says many viewers of this episode. Tauros proves to be a formidable Pokemon in this battle and is a key part in Ash's victory over Drake. What I think makes Tauros so important to this win is that Tauros wasn't even a Pokemon that Ash wanted in the first place, yet it became integral to Ash's victory over the Orange League. However, unless we saw Tauros' origin episode, we don't know that Ash didn't initially want Tauros, so that aspect of the story is weaker. So those are Tauros' most prominent appearances in the Pokemon anime, and I'm sure a lot of viewers out there were confused when viewing these episodes and were hoping to at some point catch the episode where Ash actually caught his Tauros, but no matter how much you saw Pokemon on TV back in the day, that episode would never air. Here's why. Chapter 2, the Banned Episode. Ash captured Tauros in the episode The Legend of Dratini. The episode revolves around Ash visiting the Safari Zone, which is an extremely important part of the Pokemon Red and Blue video games of which the anime is based on. It's a simple episode revolving around Team Rocket trying to capture Dratini, and Ash and friends stopping them. The Safari Zone is a great backdrop for a Pokemon episode, as it further reinforces one of the main themes of Pokemon, which is environmental protection and stability. Team Rocket represent those who wish to destroy the environment for their own gain. Since this episode does an excellent job of setting up the beauty of the Safari Zone and why it's a place worth protecting, we as the audience root for Team Rocket to be foiled and one of the Safari Zone's most beautiful and mysterious Pokemon to remain protected. So if this is such a great episode with a positive message, why was it banned? Well, it's all this guy's fault. This is the Safari Zone Warden, and he's quite passionate about protecting the Pokemon that live on his preserve. Too passionate at times. His use of firearms in the name of protecting the Safari Zone is the reason that this episode was banned. So there's actually a good reason that the Warden acts this way in the show. It's a way of showing how important it is to protect the environment, and it's also a way of showing how much you have to actually do in order to protect a place like the Safari Zone. Honestly, I think the Warden's eccentric behavior kind of endears him as a character. He's really willing to do anything to protect the Safari Zone. Though maybe he did go a little overboard with his initial threats against Ash. The networks probably didn't take too kindly to having their children's show protagonists threatened in this way. It's one thing to have Ash get electrocuted by Pikachu or burned by Charizard, which are things that are likely just as lethal in real life, but since it's a cartoon, these things come off as cartoony, whereas the threats from the Warden are a little real. However, I think this episode being banned for this reason speaks to a level of sensitivity that I just don't sympathize with. I think the way the Warden is portrayed is necessary to telling the audience what kind of character he is, and necessary to showing how important it is to follow the rules of the Safari Zone. If the Warden threatened to, scold Ash and yell at him if he was a naughty boy, I don't think it really would have been as strong of a scene. So no, I really don't think that the episode's ban was justified. But enough about this episode ban debate. What about Tauros? In the episode, whenever Ash tries to capture a Safari Zone Pokemon, a herd of Tauros run past, causing Ash to capture a Tauros instead. In the games, the Safari Zone is a place that's all about expanding the amount of Pokemon the player has access to, and an average player is usually going to leave the Safari Zone with about 4 to 5 new Pokemon to possibly add to their team. Since Ash doesn't often capture new Pokemon because every time he does capture a new Pokemon, it's gotta be really important to the story, the writers had to come up with a reason why Ash didn't get a bunch of new Pokemon when he visited the Safari Zone. But they also had to still acknowledge that the Safari Zone was a place where you captured a lot of Pokemon. Their solution was to add in a bit where Ash just accidentally catches 30 Tauros. But since the episode was banned, we lose out on all of that. We lose out on a story about protecting the environment. We lose out on seeing Dratini and Dragonair for the first time in the anime and a story focused all around them. We lose out on understanding why Ash has Tauros in future episodes, all because of a few over-the-top moments that just were seen as going too far. Beyond what I think about why the episode was banned, I do think it's interesting that something like that can have such a profound effect on the story. I think a question I would like to leave off is, what should the show creators have done? While I think it would be nice if we could live in a world where this episode could have just aired and been fine, we clearly do not live in that world. And since we don't, should the show creators have recognized that and maybe toned down some of the scenes with the Warden? Or were they right to stick to their guns? No pun intended. Hey, just so you know, I cover the Pokemon video game series over on my other channel, The Game Cubicle. I actually just did a video all about the Safari Zone. You should really check it out. If you like what I do and want to see me do more of it, consider becoming a channel member or supporting my Patreon. Link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.